Welcome to the 19th reading of my memoir, The Innocence of Guilt. The Huts, Upper Camp. My father found a job at Lakenheath Air Base, so we waited for evening to move everything up to the new hut. Somebody lent us a hand cart and we piled as much as we could onto it, making many trips back and forth on the dirt path. Back-breaking work for my parents and Din, but we children thought it great fun. Some of the upper-end boys who knew David from school helped us carry things and push the cart along. Darkness descended by the time the last load reached the hut's entrance, with everybody exhausted. At the bottom of the path leading to the hut, my mother's dressing table mirror slid off onto the ground and cracked. Poor Mum. All her strong resolve crumbled at the sight. She burst into tears, overcome by her tiredness and the belief she was now due for 7 years of bad luck, as if the last few months hadn't been enough to last her a lifetime. I waited for the bad luck to start, wondering what form it would take this time. The hut was cramped with 3 adults, 2 growing children and 1 dog, but it was dry. Its 16 by 30-foot dimensions contained a living room with butler-style cold water sink and cast-iron stove for heating and cooking, 2 separate bedrooms partitioned off at the back. A small storage room behind the lavatory served as Din's bedroom. No scullery, no bathroom. The lavatory was outside at the front of the hut. Invisible eyes bored into me every time I opened the door to use it. My father built a chicken wire fence around the hut, mostly to keep our dog from escaping, and his and Din's bicycles from being stolen, but to some extent in an effort to enclose us in our own little world, so we could deny where we had landed up. He built David and me another swing set, which, like the fence, separated us from the other children. The communal swings hung from a large tree in a clearing in front of our hut. We didn't stay inside our enclosure much, but it still gave the impression of snobbery, as no one else bothered with fences. Soon Mum took pride in our new home. She planted flowers either side of the path leading up to the front door, but she kept to herself. Dad's new job seemed to suit him. We hadn't visited the air base and never would, so to us he worked in a beautiful paradise land set down in the middle of the forest. The base had its own stores, its own schools, its own hospital, its own movie theatre and recreational facilities. "You should see what they have there," he said to Mum and Din. "Everything the families want is flown out in huge aeroplanes from America." And to David and myself, "When the planes land, the backs open up and the insides are as large as a house, full of huge crates packed with toys." He knew this because he worked in shipping and receiving, the likes of which we have never seen in our shops. His eyes grew large and bright as he described the expensive toys shipped over for the base children, such treasures beyond our reach. What upset him, though, was the waste he saw everywhere, especially food. "How can they throw it out?" he asked of Mum. He thought of us, no doubt, always hungry. Whenever he could, he brought some home before it found its way into the rubbish bin. He introduced us to some strange mixtures in taste. We never understood the habit of eating savoury food with sweet, such as sausages with pancakes and syrup, or the equally weird concoction of peanut butter mixed with jam. I preferred the little cakes and pastries he carried home in his bicycle basket, and if he arrived home empty-handed, I felt the loss keenly. Comics were thrown out on the base every day, and my brother and I, experienced our first glimpse of American adult horror comics. If my father had taken a close look at them beforehand, maybe he wouldn't have brought them home for his children to read. I became caught up in a web of terror, although what I read and saw in the coloured graphics filled me with thoughts of death. I couldn't put them down. David never said they upset him, but I kept silent too. I didn't want to tell Dad how the comics affected me because I didn't want to hurt his feelings, but every night I went to bed frightened. David and I were soon invited to join a select group of boys and girls on a foraging expedition for bike parts at the local dump. This invite told us we were accepted beyond question in the upper camp. We need have no fear from the stone throwers. Martin, the head forager, whom the others looked up to, took a liking to me and protected me from bullies, but couldn't protect me from my own stupidity. Always seeking out friendship and acceptance, I took to hanging around with the rough boys and girls, and the inevitable stone fights broke out. These weren't only directed towards the lower-end children. They set on each other over trivial matters. A boy known for his short temper, and you'd think I'd know better than to deliberately goad him, became their target. I went along with the crowd. We chased him up a tree. Cornered and taunted beyond endurance, my cruel words mixing in with everybody else's, stones expertly launched from his slingshot rained down on us. One hit the inside of my mouth. Blood gushed out and I took off for home, screaming all the way. I wasn't too badly hurt, but Mum did have to pack my mouth with cotton to stop the bleeding. When my father came home from the base, he sat me on the little seat attached to the front of his bicycle and pedalled furiously in the dark all the way into town to the doctor's evening surgery. I sensed the anger ready to burst out of his body as we flew along. I thought we would crash and I'd end up with a worse injury. Mum kept me home from school for a week and wouldn't let me out of the hut, except to use the lavatory, while my father ranted and raved. I'm going to report that boy to the authorities, and he's going to be taken away and locked up, he yelled. I had a perfect view of the boy's hut from our window, and all week long I nervously stared out of it, expecting a big van to drive up and for him to be dragged away. So upset to think he might get taken from his family because of me, I begged my father not to do it. He didn't, and relief flooded over me. But he couldn't let it go. He went over to the boy's hut and punched out his father. He came home so proud to have gained what he called respect in the camp. But David and I knew everyone kept away from him because they feared what he might do if they ever crossed him. The Americans still inserted themselves in our lives. A favourite activity of a group of us was to walk to the main road and wait for their cars to come. If they saw us, they stopped the car, got out, opened the boot at the back and tossed out packets and packets of Wrigley's chewing gum onto the road for us to scramble after. While we frantically grabbed as much gum as we could stuff in our pockets, they stood there grinning at us. Many of the children wore blue jeans, perfect for running through the forest and climbing trees. The Americans had put on a Christmas party and given a free pair of jeans to every child in camp. But we must have arrived too late to get our names on the list because we hadn't been invited to a party. I so wanted a pair of American blue jeans with back and front riveted pockets, but you couldn't buy them in Mildenhall. I asked my mother for one of Dad's worn-out long-sleeved shirts and sewed a pair of long trousers for myself out of them, using the sleeves for the trouser legs. Of course, they looked terrible, and I realized I couldn't be seen in them outside the hut. The same fate befell the sandals I made from an old pair of rubber wellies. cut up with scissors, and string to tie them onto my feet, but I enjoyed the creative process. I made friends for a while with a girl my age called Christine. She turned my thoughts towards my first friend of the same name. I wondered if I'd ever see her again, or if she ever thought of me. Come to that, I often thought about Mr. Fuchs and the book prize, but I'd given up on it arriving in the post. My new friend came from a large family. Her mother had a new baby, so Christine, as the second oldest child, often cared for her younger brothers and sisters. Not much time to play, but she managed to get to Sunday school, operating in one of the abandoned concrete buildings still in one piece, albeit pretty run down with broken windows. Every Sunday afternoon, 2 teachers cycled out from the Gospel Hall in Milden Hall and gathered children together for lessons. The young man and woman paid us lots of attention, even taking our photographs, and a small number always showed up to make their efforts worthwhile. The attention was much needed. So many of the camp children foraged for themselves that my mother said she felt sorry for the poor little mites. Most school mornings we heard a knock on the door, and a child would be on the doorstep, begging to borrow a pair of shoes so he or she could attend school. Mum always refused because she knew she'd never see the shoes again. David and I never missed a day at school because we had no shoes to wear. Asked for other things as time went by, she complained to Din Din that everyone at camp must think us rich because we lived behind a chicken wire fence. Gilbert worked hard at a low-paying job. She worked hard at looking after the family, and all Din Din had was his pension. Everything we bought came from rummage sales. I crawled through legs to reach the table full of clothes and grabbed whatever my mother pointed out to me, often finding myself in a tug-of-war with an angry woman over the desired piece of clothing, and if they thought we were better off than them, how come we lived in a Nissen hut at a camp considered the lowest place in society? But she soon realized her morals alone set her apart from some of them. Thank you for listening. Please feel free to subscribe, like, or comment on this reading. And hopefully you will tune in to the next one. Bye for now.